Take care.
Good afternoon. I'm Chandan Raikar from Department of Media Studies, Reva University. Today, we are having our 8th session of our national level faculty development program on contemporary approaches in media. I request all the attendees to please turn off your web cameras and keep your microphones on mute. However, you may unmute them during the question and answer session. Also, please note that it is mandatory for you to fill in the feedback form to get your e-certificates. The feedback form will be provided at the end of the session in the chat box. Over to Ms. Bhagyalakshmi to introduce our guest speaker for today's session.
Thank you, Chandan. Good afternoon, all. Allow me to address today's guest today.
Bhagya, your mic is on mute.
Are you able to hear me all?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Chandan. Good afternoon to all. Allow me to address today's guest, Asmita Nandi, who is a multimedia journalist with the Quint for past 3 years. She has reported, produced, and anchored several stories on caste, communalism, gender, and dissent. She recently won the Ramnath Goenka Journalism Award for her documentary on the making of Lynchistan. She also has an award-winning documentary, Haryana's Rape Culture, to her credit. Born and brought up in Kolkata, she has completed her journalism course from ACJ Chennai after doing her graduation in political science from Loreto College, Kolkata. Over to you, Asmita. Thank you for joining us for today.
Thank you, Bhagyalakshmi. And I want to start the session firstly apologizing for postponing it since yesterday. I was really caught up with the Hathras case. I apologize for it. Also, I want to begin the session by just letting you know, because I'm very young in this profession, I would like to, and I'm mostly on the ground and, doing a lot of like on the job I'm learning. So I would like this session to be really, really interactive. Any question at any point of time, whoever has or anything that you want to discuss, please like unmute yourself and ask the question. I will begin by asking everybody a question. If you guys are, for the yes, whoever is saying yes, please raise a hand on Google Meet. The question is, how many of you actually believe that Sushant Singh Rajput's death had something murky to deal with it? For example, it wasn't a plain suicide and it was something fishy that was going on. How many of you all believe that? Can I please see a raise of hand? Right. I just saw two. No, just three people believe that Sushant Singh Rajput's death wasn't suicide. The three people who believed that it was not simply a suicide, can one of you please unmute and tell me why you all didn't believe? Like, if was there a reason specially? Anybody? Was there any doubt that you had seen somewhere, you'd read somewhere?
Hello, ma'am. Monisha here. Sushant Singh Rajput is what we see in TV is like they are saying that it is definitely a murder and not a suicide thing, because we can see the thing which he had in his neck, or whenever a person hangs himself, the basic thing is that tongues come out or something like that. But here we didn't see anything like that, and nobody saw him hanging out there. I mean, when everybody walked in, he was lying in his bed. I don't know who put him over there. So a lot of what things are going here, and I mean, people are just telling what according to their point of view. I mean, each one is telling a story in their point of view.
So you are saying that you were suspicious of it after watching it on TV, right?
Yes, and also the picture we saw here. We saw the picture of him and the videos. So yeah.
Right. Anybody else that there was a reason for believing it?
Yes, Ashmita, this is Sudeshna from Reva University. Actually, I feel I have become a victim of this concept of agenda setting of media, where I have had the WTV blaring in my house, for a lot of duration during the lockdown period, and constantly there was this images and the conversations and debates and discussions happening constantly over this issue. And then following this, we saw many other media channels also following the same trend and getting on the same bandwagon kind of an effect, where they also kind of whatever the channel was doing. So at that point in time, actually, I believed in all the conspiracy theories that were making the rounds as to that there was something unnatural in terms of the death of Sushant Singh Rajput, besides the suicide point which was there. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like I said, I wouldn't blame you for that, for believing in it. I wouldn't blame Manisha also, because our TV media, our media channels, the newspapers, the TV channels, or now the digital platforms, we look towards them for credible news. So when they say something, we tend to believe in them, right? We tend to think that, they must have gotten it verified, they've gotten it like checked. So we can believe in them, especially since like there are channels like Times Now and News 18 and India Today, which have existed for a period of time. But did you all see the current report by the AIMS? 7 doctors in AIMS who have examined the entire case have clearly ruled out any possibility of murder or suspicious death. They said it clearly that it is suicide, right? So when I'm saying this, when I'm saying that TV medium or for that matter newspapers and certain digital platforms too, they shape the narrative that we have our conversations about. If the problem is when we do not have an alternative platform to recheck our facts, to recheck what they are saying. So before I start, I want to understand from y'all, do you all understand the difference between disinformation and misinformation? Does anybody understand and can tell me? No? Okay, I'll tell you. So disinformation means somebody when they are purposely knowing very well what the facts of the matter are, when they are propagating a certain amount, certain version of truth, certain version, that is called disinformation. That is something typically done by the governments, mostly in terms of war situations. A lot of times the governments tend to give out propaganda, which is disinformation. When you're purposely trying to sell some facts to the person when you clearly know what the real facts are. Misinformation is sometimes when it's not deliberate, basically when when a lot of times reporters, when they go on ground and they are given an information and they believe them and they're misinformed. Basically they're not doing it purposely, they're not doing it deliberately, right? So like I'm going to address this in terms of TV medium about shaping narrative. Do y'all remember the JNU case in when the 2016, when Kanhaiya Kumar and Umar Khalid were held and were called the anti-national gang? Everybody remembers that? Again, raise your hands. I mean, I would really like this to be an interactive session. Nobody's raising their hand. So in 2016, in JNU, there was a protest held, and Kanhaiya Kumar, the then JNU SU president, and Umar Khalid, again JNU student leader, and a couple of others were called anti-national because allegedly they raised anti-India or pro-Pakistan slogan. Now, Z News had played that clip. The Z News clip was inaudible. They couldn't hear what they were saying, they couldn't see what they were showing, but they went on playing it. There was a producer of the Z News newsroom who had come out and said that it wasn't clear what the people were saying, but my bosses told me that we can go ahead and say that they were raising anti-India slogans. So when the video was playing, if you hear it, if you watch the video without the captions, without the slogans being written on the screen, you actually can't hear what they are saying. But Z News had put the caption below the video when they were playing it on TV. So human minds always reads or always hears what is written on the screen. And exactly that's what happened. There was nobody knows if they actually raised any anti-India slogans, but for years, for months, the students were vilified. The students were constantly called the urban Naxal gang, they called the anti-India brigade, and there was a considerable amount of delay in filing a charge sheet, even when they claimed that they had considerable amount of proof. The then Home Minister Rajnath Singh had said that we have proper proof to show that they were raising anti-India slogans, etc. But they yet still did not file a proper charge sheet for the longest time. What was stopping them? It was because they didn't have proof. It was just how the media narrative was shaping human minds and human psyche. Coming to that, I wouldn't there have also been positive impact of media driving a campaign, driving a narrative, driving for a social cause. Again, for the Jessica Lal case in I think in the 90s, when a top model in Delhi was shot dead in a public party by one of the Congress leaders' son. And NDTV was one of the NDTV and Tehelka were two of the main magazines when they came out, and they campaigned for not it was not in the 90s. I'm sorry, my bad. It was in the early 2000s, when they came out and they campaigned for her. They raised her voice. They went on, they did the investigation, they did sting operations, etc. After which they also drove a protest campaign to get justice for Jessica Lal, and that's what happened when media puts pressure on authorities to act on a certain way. They do. The authorities a lot of times are under pressure to deliver justice. Again, that has a flip side to it. When media puts a lot of pressure in terms of public pressure, public sentiment, governments often act in haste, and that might also deliver injustice. Giving an example of that is the Kolkata case, in where a young girl from a school was allegedly raped and murdered in a posh South Kolkata house. It was in 2008 of sorts. I'm not very sure of the date. It was said that the security guard of her building was the one who killed her, and there was immense outrage. The Dhananjay case, I don't know how many of you all remember the case. It was a Dhananjay case where these people were, the media was constantly focusing on it. There was a lot of pressure on the government. There were people who were coming out and saying that, there were politicians who were coming out and saying that they should be hanged and everything. It was after a longest time that a rapist was hanged till death to send a message about women's safety in 2008. I remember that case. I was very young. I was in my school, and I remember that there was a lot of outrage and a lot of media attention to the case, and after which this guy was hanged. I recently watched a movie where a flip side was it came to my notice, where it shows that probably it could have also been a case of honor killing, but because there was so much media pressure, a lot of times these facts or the way the investigation was done completely was missed out. Like, the investigation was not done properly. So in India, the justice system is such that an accused is the process till the conviction that becomes punishment. But instead, if you're not guilty till proven, you're not guilty, right? But that's not what happened in that case. Coming to the recent cases, in 2020, the Tablighi Jamaat incident. Again, my question to everybody here. Please respond. How many of you all believe that they were the ones who actually spread coronavirus? I mean, they were the ones who caused a massive spread of coronavirus. Please raise your hand. Can you all respond? And again, I would like you all to explain why you all think so, why you all felt so.
Madam, I don't know whether there's an option to raise hand.
Okay.
However, at least I have heard about it, and recently the High Court of Bombay has already chided the media for building that narrative, which was false.
Exactly. Right. And that narrative had real dangers on ground. In Calcutta, near Kolkata, again, there were riots which broke out during the coronavirus time, especially because there was a constant attempt to vilify Muslims with regard to coronavirus spread. So there were people who were saying who were constantly stigmatizing Muslims or stigmatizing their community by saying that aap log ke wajah se coronavirus hai, because of you coronavirus has spread and everything. We at the Quint, we have a fact checking side. We have a wing called the Webcoup, where we every single day we've debunked our fake news concerning the Tablighi Jamaat incident. There would be either a video, there would be either a picture, which would be circulated via social media, and a lot of times even TV media, or even like social media platforms, like, there are repeat offenders like Op India, Swarajya. They constantly pick on these social media shares and they build a narrative around it. The problem arises in urban areas. There are a lot of options for people to, or refer to an alternate source of information. For smaller towns, for a lot of people who, for even for the older generation, for that matter, they wouldn't do that. They would genuinely believe what they see in one particular channel, one particular source of information. For them, that becomes the Republic TV, which is every single day spewing hate in the name of news. From their hashtags to even presenting fake news on record. Simple fake news, and it's not just about one particular community. There are also, churning of fake news in terms of providing a little enhancement for the political leader they are loyal to. For example, there's a bizarre news. Nobody will ever believe that, but it was carried by a legitimate news channel, a Hindi channel of the India Today group, says they carried a news that Prime Minister Narendra Modi is the reincarnation of Aligarh Muslim University's founder. Can you believe that? Like, they were literally playing that on record. The problem is there are lakhs and lakhs of people who are watching this news. When you're watching this news without an alternate source of fact checking site or a motive, it is what you believe in, and that shapes your belief system. That shapes your how you look at a community, how you look at a person, how you look at a situation or a problem. Now, I would just, is it clear so far? Are there any questions regarding this part of the conversation? I can proceed after that. Please, I really would like to hear from the teachers here about what they think and what they think is the state of media in India currently. Please unmute and speak, whoever wants to. Anyone? Anybody who wants to add something to the examples that I gave so far about their personal experiences with the narrative?
Yeah, madam.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm Ravinandan from Acharya Institute. I'm assistant professor here.
Okay.
So what you said was absolutely true. And more particularly, some of the repeat offenders in the mainstream media. Okay, forgive me if I'm going to take some names. Of course, as you said, Arnab Goswami. Also, Deepak Chaurasia and some others, and particularly the Z News. So, what I want to add is, even in this pandemic time also, so much amount of fake news they have spread, and also there were some cases which were slapped against Z News, DNA. Yeah, the who is that? I don't remember his name now. Yeah, the program DNA, the anchor there, and even after all that, it is not actually, they are not actually stopping it. In the sense, I just want to know, if you take in the case of America or might be in European nations, they have got a formal fact checker websites.
Yeah.
Whereas here we have, in terms of what you represent, or in terms of alt news and other things, but it's not actually formal as backed by the government. So are there any efforts in terms of the government efforts so that people will have some formal fact checking websites in India?
Right. So the thing is, the government actually started something called the PID fact check. It's on Twitter. It's a page of by the government of India, which is monitored by the government of India. The only problem with that page is that often you find that it's more than fact. They are putting out government clarifications, which is a problem. So when you are, when there are misinformation about a certain stance that the government has taken or a certain policy that the government has made, that is when PIB fact check comes into play and calls it out, uh, and says that this is not true. But like you said, there are a lot of TV channels, there are a lot of formal media channels, formal media publications which are peddling fake news. And I call that fake news disinformation, because I believe it's the job of a journalist to understand, you can do misreporting. There can be misreporting. You can't constantly drive a narrative. That is not called misreporting. That is called narrative building. When you're driving a narrative with your hashtags, with your channels, with your, it's simple. When you look at a TV screen, there are certain things that you see in that screen. You see a hashtag on the top band. You see a slug, that's what we call it in formal language. You call it the slug on the bottom band. You see a side panel. You see the kind of guests that are brought in the channels and the kind of debates that are held. The kind of, it's simple. I'll give you an example here. I'm sorry, I'm a little diverting. I'll come back to your question again, but I just want to give you an example where, there are independent media channels. Pardon me if I'm taking wrong names here. Rajdeep Sardesai is known to be one of the more independent and impartial journalists in India right now. Even his show on the Riya Chakraborty incident, on the entire vilification of Riya Chakraborty over the Sushant Singh Rajput case, his show was done to give Riya a space to speak about her version, where a lot of people complimented, Rajdeep was doing that, was saying that, at least he's given her that space to speak. But the problem with that was, if you see the debate opening, if you see the simple music being used when that channel was playing, when the simple questions being used, it was already proving that she's a guilty person whom you're giving a chance to speak. But she was not held guilty for anything, right? Even NDTV did that, for that matter. NDTV, which is again known to be the more impartial ones among the TV media, even their debate recently was called out for, for just asking the question. I'm blanking out on the question they asked exactly, but it was like they are already holding Riya Chakraborty guilty, and then they are saying, oh, is it, let's hear it from her, sort of a thing. Which all of these things are ways of building narratives. It's not just what you're saying, it's not just what you repeat, what you are reporting. It's also about how you're presenting a show. When even for example, in the print media, what happens is with the headlines. I'm sure all of you all know about the Hathras case recently. Just yesterday, India Today put out a headline on their web page which said that tourists, garbage greets tourists as Safai Karmcharis go on a strike, without mentioning what the cause is. And that's how the reporting of any caste issue has always been in this country. For example, even when the protests that happen, whenever there is a Dalit protest which happens, it is always about the kind of inconvenience that is caused because of such a protest, more than focusing on the cause of the protest. It is always about how there are traffic jams because of a protest, instead of focusing on why these Dalits are actually out on streets and asking for what. Nobody ever cares. So when you're saying that, the same thing which happened with Shaheen Bagh, right? The kind of vilification that went on, I was on ground, I was covering the Shaheen Bagh protest, and I know for a fact that nothing of that was true. The blockade of the road, which was shown to be the biggest problem of the Shaheen Bagh protest, was not done by Shaheen Bagh protesters. It was done by the Delhi police. There was a considerable amount of road which did not need to be blocked at any point of time because of the protest, that wouldn't have hindered the protest. But the Delhi police had blocked it because to create that narrative, and the TV channels went on and on with it, right? So even when a viewer who's not very, well versed, or who's sitting away from where Shaheen Bagh is watching that news, he or she is meant to will believe that there is this amount of inconvenience which is being caused by the protesters. So you're automatically building a narrative against the cause of the protest. Now, coming back to the formal fact-checking sites, the problem is Alt News, the Webcoup, and a couple of other sites that are there. They have a very niche audience. They do not cater to a larger group of people, which is what the problem is. So even if they're fact-checking, even if they are calling out the misinformation, calling out fake news, it's almost always a bubble of people who read that part. Otherwise, people don't care. Even if they do, it's also sometimes confirmation bias when you can see through a problem and you can see through fake news, yet want to believe that because of your confirmation bias, because it suits your narrative, it suits your belief system. Please go ahead. You were saying something.
Absolutely, man. True.
Yeah. Anybody else who would like to address any issue right now about so far whatever we've spoken so far? Anybody who can talk about the print media, about how they think print media is building a narrative? No? Somebody who's not spoken so far, can someone just unmute and speak, please? Is there anybody who's going to speak? Please do. Okay, let me ask the question. How many of you think print medium is also as much as fault in terms of driving fake news? Okay, and it's you. Please tell me.
Yeah, madam.
Yes, tell me, please.
Yeah, I don't think print medium is as much as in the fault as compared to that of electronic medium, but at least I can agree on the point that they are not doing much as they could have done in exposing this fake news or busting this fake news.
Exactly. They are, I mean, even like you're saying, right? There was a formal fact-checking place, fact-checking medium. So newspapers can very well, they have a wide circulation among people who are still, who read newspapers, etc. So for them, they could easily start a fact-checking column or just a page just dedicated towards fact-checking. They don't do that. But I mean, even if they're not actively taking part in spreading fake news, they do not also like actively take part in debunking fake news for that matter, right? Again, I'll come to the hashtags. The kind of hashtags that go on TV news, TV, even for example, for social media websites. I work with a social media website. It changes. It just helps. It makes you look at a story completely differently, right? For example, again, when you are saying like, for example, is Tablighi Jamaat the new ISIS? These kind of hashtags automatically create a narrative in your mind, right? It creates a sort of vilified idea about a particular community. Even the Sudarshan news, the current Sudarshan TV debacle that is going on about them calling it UPSC jihad. There is a debate which I want to address with you all, and I want to understand what your views are. I would at least like 2-3 people to speak on it. Do you think there should be regulation in terms of content in the media? I mean, there should be a regulatory body. Should the government be regulating what kind of content any TV media or any news platform puts out? Please answer. Manisha, sorry, can you unmute and tell me what do you think about it?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you think that the government should be regulating news?
Not really. I mean, even if they government come up with some regulations, I don't think the media organization will follow it.
But I mean, there's like you said, there's already a board for regulating the kind of TV news
Yes.
that goes on, the broadcast board. But they're completely toothless. They can maximum send notices and keep sending notices. Nobody responds to
Yes,
that.
nobody responds to that.
Right. But do you believe that, and anybody can answer this, not just Nisha, do you believe that there is a sort of need, or what could be the danger for government to regulate news? If the government actually gets down to regulating news, do you think that could be dangerous, or do you think that is needed right now in the country given the amount of fake news?
Definitely, it is not required. Government should not be made the authority on media at any level. I mean, I don't think we have the freedom of speech and expression enshrined in our constitution. And we also have the 19.2, which talks about reasonable restrictions. So already things are taken care of. If there is some kind of restrictions which is required to be posed on media in terms of safety, security of the country, defamation and official secrets act, and so on and so forth, right? So I don't think there is any requirement to give government control over any aspects in terms of regulating media. That's my opinion. Yeah.
Exactly. I think it's also dangerous for the government to when it starts regulating, because what it could also mean is that when there are media channels which are critical of the government and they do not like a version, they will completely say that, okay, no, we can't allow this kind of content to go on air or to go to get published, right? So it's not just, I mean, it will actually backfire on a lot of people. Coming again, I would like another person to speak about what they think about media regulation in the country.
Of course, it's not recommended because the very function of media is to act as a watchdog. It's a watchdog of the democracy, it's a fourth pillar. So, a media that cannot criticize a government is quite useless.
Yeah, but they're bringing this. They're talking about regulation in terms of fake of a kind of the narrative that the that Sudarshan news channels build, like about the UPSC jihad and all of those things. In that case, do you think media regulation would be required or would be a good idea?
Am I audible now?
Yeah, you are.
Yes, actually, I would like to point out to something like that, BCCC and everything like that. Those kinds of content regulatory framework is there, but unless one makes any complaints, those are not of any work. That I like to point out.
Can you please repeat yourself?
BCCC, especially BCCC and like those councils.
Right. Can you repeat yourself? Sorry, I couldn't hear you clearly.
Actually, I like to point out that BCCC, for example, in broadcast media, BCCC is there. Though in web there is no such councils or board to regulate any media content. But in broadcast media, we have BCCC. So those are to how much extent they are working. Because unless one makes any complaint, those are not of any work.
Exactly. So that's what we were just discussing, that these boards are already existing for certain things, and they're completely toothless in terms of taking any action on the kind of fake news. So coming to Sudarshan channel, actually a good example that I thought of, during Delhi riots, they went into Tahir Hussein's house, which is completely illegal. First of all, you can't go into a spot of crime, which is said to be a spot of crime. They went inside that house and garage. They got hold of a random neighbor. They showed some clothes lying on the floor, and they claimed that there was a woman who was raped in that house, and then she was dumped in the garbage in the drain nearby. See, there are certain things which are facts. There are certain things which are amplifications. There was a person who was found in a drain, who was murdered during the riot. But these kind of shows are just meant to amplify the anger, to amplify the outrage. That these are things which incite people to react with anger. And I'm sure a lot of people, I have seen this in my own house, where my family, the older generation in my family, they do not, I mean, when I am trying to tell them, counter them with logic, they do not realize that they do not want to hear it. They are always like, no, but they showed it to us. How can you say it's not true? I mean, they've showed it to us with proof. They went inside the house and said. And you cannot argue with them on logic. You cannot argue with them on facts. It's also because the lack of access to a lot of fact checking websites, like you said before, right? Like the readership of something like Alt News or the Webcove. These are very limited, and again, it's in a bubble, so people do not, the mass do not consume the fact checks, and the reach of a fake news is way greater than the reach of the fact check also. So even if there are alternative sites which are fact checking information, there is no way for that amount of fact check or amount of correct information to reach the broader audience. There's a recent trend that, again, I'm taking names. I'm sorry, I kind of offended a lot of TV channels and newspapers today. But I'm going to take names again and say Times Now has constantly been doing this trend, and they put out claiming that it's an unverified video of so and so thing. During the entire Galwan incident, they would randomly put out videos of Chinese soldiers. They would put out videos of Indian soldiers, just amplifying the propaganda side of the government, or showing the other side as the enemy. And not just during the Galwan incident. There are a lot of times when Times Now has just put out a video which says unverified video of so and so thing. The point is, you're saying, okay, you're being truthful in saying that it's an unverified video, but who is supposed to verify? You are the news channel. You are the person whom for the audience looks towards to get verified information. If you are not verified, then why are you putting out the news? What is the point of putting out a news like that? If you are not verified about the news, then how can you put it out to an entire audience which is just going to watch the news and they will take it at face value, right? Now I think I'll open the session for Q&A. I don't have anything else to say on this. I'm sure all of you all know what's going on, what is happening in the country. So anybody has any questions for me? Anybody has any kind of any amount of suggestions, any amount of inputs to give, please do give. You all are very senior to me. I would really like some feedback and kind of questions.
Madam, what do you think of this particular idea? Now we all know that media is supposed to act as watchdog of democracy or watchdog of government, to be specific. Right. So what about the idea that there might be people who themselves become watchdog of media? I will repeat. I will repeat. People themselves becoming people themselves becoming watchdog of media, in the sense that I am actually suggesting, if a particular subject called data literacy and media literacy, whatever might be, data literacy or media literacy, if it is being introduced from 8th standard as a compulsory subject, okay, we can discuss all these things which you told, and also about many other things related to ownership, political backgrounds of all those things. And then just 3 or 4 years later, we will have a generation who will really become watchdog of the media, in the sense they will call out the media bluff. What do you think about this idea?
I think it's an amazing idea, and I think I have studied in a journalism school. I've studied in ACJ, so we've had a very short course, and even in that course, we were taught a sort of media literacy, how to check on media, media narrative, and all of those things. But what we were not taught, and which I think is very very important to understand in today's times, is media ownership, because that drives the agenda. You can understand why a particular media house is reporting on something because of their owner. I mean, you can completely differentiate. I think for now we have some, like News Laundry does a very good job of of being the media watchdog, and they observe the media very closely. They do pieces on them. Even the Caravan actually does a quite comprehensive pieces on media owners, media the way media reports and everything. So I think it's a very very good idea. It's a very very important thing to do, because I feel like even for young journalists like me and like other people who are getting into the profession, who are gaining grounds in the profession, it's easier for us to understand and to call out and to stand up to our editors and tell them that this is not cool, this is not okay for what you're doing. And I understand that you're doing it for your owners or for your ownership, loyalties, but this is not how it works. And that information will be with me only if I am aware or be made to aware of via probably a formal subject. Because like say, maybe for example, if there are 5 people who are studying or who are getting into media, maybe one of them is interested in actually getting into the background of the media of the media company they're entering on a media profession. If there is a formal subject, if there's a professional subject, more and more people will become aware of the entire gamble that the media does. So I think it is a great idea. Anybody else has any questions at all about anything?
Ma'am, there's one question from Mukesh Kumar. He's asking, what types of fact-checking tools do we have? Could you please elaborate on that?
Right. See, there are a lot of fact-checking tools. I wouldn't go into the too many technical aspects of it, but the first thing is something like a Google reverse image search or Google video reverse search. Basically, it's I think called the InVid for videos. What you can do is, if you see a picture that's come on your WhatsApp, I didn't even go into the WhatsApp entire controversy, but if it comes on WhatsApp, you can just download the picture. There's something called Google reverse image search. Go there, upload the picture. They will show you, send you back to the actual picture, or give you more options about those pictures to understand from where that picture is recent, where that picture is old, what is the context of that picture. And it's the same with videos. That's the simplest thing that one can do. In terms of other things, something like sometimes it's as simple as just googling. It's as simple as can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Sometimes it's as simple as just googling a particular date. For example, how I fact check is say I've seen a particular photo. There are a lot of times in that photo itself, you will spot hints or spot like focuses. For example, I remember this one case where from Jammu and Kashmir, this protest picture was doing the rounds as some communal protest that happened. And I saw and I zoomed into the picture, and that was claimed to be from somewhere in Uttar Pradesh actually. I zoomed into the picture and I realized that the board on a shop, on top of a shop name was Jammu and Kashmir. Then I tracked down the pin code basically. I called up that shop. There was the number was also visible on that picture. So I called up the shop to understand what had happened, and they told me no, it was something about wages that was going wrong, and there was a small scuffle, and it wasn't because of any communal issue. So sometimes you just zoom into the picture, just watch, just look at the picture carefully about clues, about hints that could point you to certain things. Sometimes there are signboards, like there are in a car, for example, if there's a car behind that picture, Just zoom into that picture and you can see the name, the plate of the car, and then you can just keep googling from one clue to the other. That will help you get get into rigorous way of fact checking and also help you find the truth. Anyone else? Please ask questions or give inputs, feedback, anything that would help take this conversation. Anybody has a question about the kind of work I do, or the kind of what could be a particular story that they want to discuss?
Ashmita, the recent this Athras the case.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a very sensitive issue where the community is involved, and the people are talking about the political party, and different media already bipolarized with the different with their agendas. So how to go about when we are handling this kind of the stories, Ashmita?
It's a very tricky question. So, yeah, I mean, I have been reporting on the Hathras case myself, actually, for the Quint. But the thing is, there are, again, I believe the only way to, for reporters also, when we go on the ground, there are this couple of local journalists who are saying, they basically work on planted stories by police officials. So I believe the better way to do is, believe in a credible journalist, credible fact-checked sites. Right now, I'm not saying the TV media is not, but the digital has shown a way ahead in terms of fact-checking, in terms of the Wire, the Stroll, Indian Express, for that matter, the Quint. News Laundry. So I think go with their versions. Go with, at least for now, believe till what the police is saying. Again, it's a very tricky thing to say, what believe what the police is saying, but always take that with a pinch of salt, because right now I believe the police has already found PFI links and all of those things. I mean, when I went there, I did not realize, I did not think there was any sort of international plot or anything was being. It was a very local problem that the police keeps enhancing according to their agenda. And there have been many examples, several examples in the past where the police has used certain situations to drive their narrative of international plots and all of those things. So, I mean, I don't know what the correct answer to that is. How do we handle it? Maybe just read multiple different sorts of news and take everything with a pinch of salt, and that's kind of my advice, and for everything, like in general also. Anyone else?
Did you look into the story of farm bills?
I thought, sorry, couldn't hear you.
Farm bills.
Farm bills, yes, I did. I was on the ground for reporting that also. Tell me. You had a question, sir?
No, I'm just wondering, right, the way it has been reported and it has been taken up by different political parties, and their stand, and what do you understand from the very beginning?
The problem with the farm, again, the farm bills has been, it's been very divided in terms of not just media houses, in terms of politicians, in terms of farmers themselves, in terms of experts also. So the thing is, the entire problem was created, the entire controversy was created because when the government made this policy, they did not take the farmers into account. They did not take the farmers into confidence. There could be merits of the farm bills. There could be demerits of the farm bills, but when you are making a policy for someone, you cannot make a policy without taking the stakeholders in confidence. That was their main anger, because when I went to the ground, I was covering it for the protests in Haryana and Punjab. Most of them said the same thing. I mean, they're just scared. Right now, what the government is saying, they say they believe that there's precedence of the government not fulfilling its promise on the MSP, on a couple of other farm promises. So they're just scared Right now, the government is saying that they will keep the mandis or they will keep the middlemen. But after a point, when interests are not being satisfied with the mandis and the middlemen, they will abolish that. And at that point of time, they won't be able to do anything. And for example, the Punjab and Haryana, the MSP is the greatest source of income. So I'm just saying, I don't know if it's good, I don't know if it's bad. I'm going to just present what the farmers themselves are telling me. That is, for me, according to me, is the ideal way of reporting. Also, having said that, I think it's very important for journalists to look out the window and see if somebody is telling me that it's raining. I can't just write it's raining. I have to actually look out the window and see if it is actually raining or not. For a journalist, it's very important. When you're being objective, you don't just put versions by versions. You try and put context to those versions. You try and verify those versions. Try and go into the background of what that person is saying and why that person is saying. When you're on ground, when you are reporting from the desk every time, it can't just be a version backed by a version versus a version. You have to make that effort to just look outside the window and see why that person is saying what that person is saying. For me, in terms of in the farm bill incident, I have counter question, like when I put out the video, I have counter questioned them about the positive of it also, and they've answered it to me. They've told them that why they think it's not a good idea. And that is very important, to just hear the people who's be affected by it so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ma'am, but sometimes journalists aren't allowed to do their job. Like, for example, the Hathras case. I heard that journalists weren't allowed to enter the village. So, what about then? Like, what do we have to do that time when you're not allowed to verify the information or try to get our sources?
Even if you're not verified, I mean, see, first point, if you're not being able to verify certain something, you do not put it out. Simple as that. Even if you're late, you can't, like, the problem with our media right now is we're working on the breaking news situation. The TV media especially is very anchor based and not reporter based. Like they want to report the news sitting in their AC studios in Delhi and in Noida and not actually go on ground. So anyway, the fact checking part of it goes away. But when you're not allowed to do your job, when you're stopped by the police or stopped by the government, the administration, you report what you're seeing right then. You tell your audience that we are not being able to report. This is what the government or the police person is doing to me. You can't sit outside the village and say that the person, I mean, if you haven't spoken to the family on call, or if you've not been able to verify it, you can't sit outside the village and say, oh, the police person is intimidating them. That's not how it works. But of course, if you are outside the village, if you have a phone call with a person, if you meet a family member, or if you know some family member who's been present, who's seen what's happened, and that person has said something or alleged something, that can be that can definitely, that is how you verify. There are other ways of verifying it also. It's not just you can't reach your source, so you can't verify. There are a lot of ways of fact checking, of not fact checking, of trying to get information from the ground. And that's also because you build sources. So when I went to Hathras on the first day, I was allowed, actually, that this is right after she was cremated. So that day I was allowed. So I mean, I could sense this sort of that kind of tension building up and everything. I gathered a couple of phone numbers from not just from the family of the victim, but also from the neighbors who were there. The next day again, when the media people were stopped from entering the village and everything, I was actually in Delhi. I could get certain information about what was happening in the village from 2-3 people. I did not believe just one person saying, there were these police people, this, that, whatever. I had to verify, I had to fact check with 2-3 people to understand, and their versions matched. They were all saying the same thing. So I knew that, they were not connected in any way. So they wouldn't be, conspiring and telling me the same version. It's not possible. So they possibly must be saying the truth. Even then, I mentioned it specifically that I am not present on ground. This is what the family is telling me. The number of family members were telling me this. So I think that is very important, that if you're not able to fact check something, you first of all do not put it out. Something like, the Times now, putting out unverified videos is just irresponsible. It's not, they're doing it for the massive number of viewership or the retweets for probably. Does that answer your question, Chandan?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
I think we are about time.
Ma'am, hello. Yeah, to telecast a news or to write article, a journalist need to collect a lot of information, right?
Right.
So, how to know the information we collect by the source is credible or not? What if it's lead to misinformation?
That's what I said. So when that's exactly why I made the difference between misinformation and disinformation. So like I said, when you're talking to one particular source of yours, and that person is say claiming that he was beaten up, okay. Just say, for example, you've gone to a place where this person is claiming that he was beaten up, and there's another person who was claiming he was not beaten up. Okay. Try and speak to several people, as many people as you can, to understand these versions of the version of incidents. They will not match most of the time, but they will kind of give you an idea about a certain timeline of events that would have happened. And then you can say alleged this, but I found this, or someone else also told me this. So that context is very important. You can't just put an allegation and say, "Oh, this has been alleged," without any amount of backing up of that allegation.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
The question?
Yeah, thank you.
Any more questions?
Okay, so how do you verify the facts relating to the COVID-19 pandemic, the fatalities and the cases, right? So when the sole source is actually from the government and maybe compromise some other health workers who say the other way around.
There are other way around. I don't know how many media channels have done it, but there was a story about how Delhi was actually hiding the COVID death figures. And there's another way of understanding why the government figures are not an absolute is understanding how they calculate these figures. In terms of governments, when they're calculating casualties, they do not take a lot of things in account. For example, they will not take somebody who is who's they've acting. I think they've updated the guidelines now. By that point of time, they would not somebody who's died of some other illness but has been found COVID positive later would not be accounted for. So all of these things are ways to understand how the government numbers are not absolute in any way. We do not, in terms of finding out the exact number of people, I do not think there is a way at the moment. But what a certain media house had done while covering the COVID deaths in Delhi, where they went to this particular burial grounds, a couple of burial grounds where COVID deaths, COVID people were burial grounds and cremation grounds, where some of COVID affected patients were being buried and cremated. And they realized that the entries made in those books were far greater than what the government claimed for that particular day. Or for that, I mean, they collated the list of casualties in these several burial grounds. They checked with the hospital which were dealing with these casualties, and then they checked with the government numbers. They were anyway greater than the government numbers, set aside the people who did not go to the hospital or who did not come to those burial grounds. Even those people who came, even those numbers were far greater than what the government was giving for that particular day. So that, I think, was a very good check on why and on how the Delhi government was trying to hide the COVID data.
Thank you.
Are we done, Chandan?
Yes, ma'am. Maybe we can take one last question.
Yeah, I can. I mean, if there are questions, I can.
Anyone? Do you have any questions? All right, I suppose not.
Thank you
Okay.
so much. I loved speaking with all of you, and I hope it has, helped you people in some way or the other.
Asmita, that was a very informative talk. We would like to thank Ms. Asmita Nandi for spending her precious time with all of us in this virtual platform. Her talk on misinformation and media narrative has provided us immense knowledge in understanding the flip side of news propagation. Her knowledge, acquired from her experiences as a journalist, has made this session percipient. I'm sure all of you have found this FTP session knowledgeable and loved listening to Ms. Asmita. Asmita, thank you so much for sharing your precious time and knowledge with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm really sorry for postponing the session again yesterday. And thanks a lot. Take care, all of you.
Thank you. I would also like to thank all the attendees for spending your time in attending the 8th day of our faculty development program. Dear attendees, please note that it is mandatory for you to fill in the feedback form to get your e-certificates. The feedback form link is provided in the chat section. Thank you all. Have a nice day.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.